Don't get me wrong, this is an episode of Democrats are wrong about everything, but only really the first half. Because we're talking about something that a lot of people think is going to be contributing to a big red wave in the midterms this November, which is leftist, far extremist, radical leftist district attorneys are starting to get ousted, and some extremist leftist uh, politicians are getting ousted on the West Coast, which a lot of people think is unprecedented good news. And it kind of is. But what I woke up to this morning, the good news I woke up to is the DA of San Francisco, a guy by the name of like Chesa Bowden or Bowden, has been ousted because San Francisco is a hellhole where criminals are straight up not prosecuted, where even violent criminals and armed criminals are being released instead of prosecuted. It's not just the whole shoplifting fiasco, although that is destroying the economy of San Francisco. The fact that shoplifting and theft is basically legal in San Francisco because of this guy and because of, well, city council members and senators from the area. People like, I'm pretty sure Maxine Waters is part of that district, if I remember correctly. But, California is not going to get better just because they realize that somebody who is a demon from the ninth pit of fucking hell should be replaced with a demon from the sixth pit of fucking hell. No, that's not going to solve a damn thing. But you need to realize that when you're told that prosecuting criminals is bad and that what's going to improve the situation and improve racial equality and even to reduce crime and reduce police spending is simply to not respond to even felonies and basically decriminalize most, if not all, misdemeanors across the city and jurisdiction. That makes no fucking sense. And of course, it is created to the point where there's just black markets everywhere. You got literally thousands of stories of people robbing everything they can possibly physically carry off the shelves of a Walgreens and then selling it off the street corner less than 100 yards away. And no response is given. Nobody can do anything. So there are many DAs like this, not just on the West Coast, that's occurring in Georgia and shit like that. And up in the north, and Minnesota is having problems with this kind of shit. Now, obviously, this is doing nothing to reduce crime, and it's doing nothing to reduce violence, and it's doing nothing to reduce even shit like murder, which is up in these cities. So, what do you think is going to be the result of Chesa Bowden getting kicked out? Well, somebody as bad or worse than him is going to replace him. Because once you encounter people who are so delusional, psychotic, and insane, and completely indoctrinated that, of course, it's blue no matter who, and they've accepted people like Chesa Bowden into these positions wholeheartedly and welcome them, and also have set up voting systems where basically everybody's splitting the vote every which way, and if somebody even has a smidgen of support over the next guy, he's likely to be able to primary that guy or to win a three-way or four-way election, as often is the case in these districts, and you're pretty much never going to encounter a right-wing candidate winning. It's considered an impressive showing if there's like four guys running and the Republican takes third place. That's considered an impressive right-wing, campaign in these places, especially like South California. But who is Chesa Bowden? Or Chesa Bowden, or whatever his name is. This guy is the son of two Weather Underground terrorists that are still in jail to this day from the crimes they committed, I believe, in the 70s. Now, if any of you don't know who Weather Underground is, they were a big domestic terrorist organization in America in the 70s, and they were Antifa on steroids. If Antifa did a lot more assassinations and bombings rather than just political violence and riots, that's what the Weather Underground is. The same extremist communist organization, and Antifa is a communist organization, and Weather Underground is a communist organization. But Weather Underground murdered lots of people. They carried out political assassinations and bombings of federal buildings. Okay, these guys were serious business. So if a guy in his own campaign ads admits to being the son of domestic terrorists and says, oh, it's a bad thing that as a very small child, because his parents were incarcerated when he was like little more than an infant. And he said, I had to, try to talk to my parents through a glass wall, and I had to go through a metal detector, and all this stuff to go into prison visitation in order to hug my parents. Well, clearly that's something wrong. No, your parents basically should have been executed for treason, because they're not just lunatic criminals, they're domestic terrorists who are trying to destroy this country, literally. And you have shown that you are at the very least sympathetic to their ideology. And what did you do with your position as district attorney? You tried to destroy San Francisco on purpose. So you should also, at the very least, be in prison, if not, again, executed for high treason, which is not to say it's a threat towards this douchebag, but that, according to what he has done to this country, on the law of the land, again, I have to say this all the time, that the sentence is death. But, of course, this guy's not even going to go to jail. He's just going to lose his job. And the Dems are going to replace him with someone just like him. The definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And this is pretty much deliberate, because Democrats are so incorrigibly stupid, so phenomenally ignorant, and so sadistic and really just evil, just straight up morally evil, just completely non-human, that after they've ruined cities like San Francisco, ruined cities like Los Angeles, ruined cities like Trenton and New York City and all that shit, they just flee to a right-wing state because they really actually want right-wing policies. But then once they get there, they vote for more terroristic left-wing extremists in those states. And you get Austin and South Texas basically getting ruined. You get Arizona getting ruined. You get Florida is at risk. So the other half of this video here that we got to talk about is how Republicans are wrong about something. They're expecting a red wave. Well-respected right-wing political commentators like Sticks, X, and Hammer are saying, black pillars are going to get BTFO'd. That if you think that just because 2020 was, do I even have to say anything? I have no idea if you get struck if you still say anything about the 2020 presidential election. But yeah, I'm sure Biden is a legitimate president of this country. I'm sure he didn't, basically steal the election. I'm absolutely certain that he, got 81 million votes, and that I'm sure it's perfectly normal that a lot of districts had more than 100% of their total voting rolls voting for Biden, with some of them still voting for Trump. I'm sure that's normal. Yeah, I'm sure that's legitimate, and I'm sure the fact that this country did not allow any legitimate investigation into that election is a sign that we can continue to vote to change things. I'm sure your vote still matters, dear viewer. I'm sure my vote is still matters. And keep in mind, I live in South Florida, which has been notorious for election fraud since 2000, let alone 2022. And is it my still, even as a right-wing person, my earnest opinion that Al Gore won the state of Florida and George W. Bush stole the election in 2000. And I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get kicked off of YouTube for saying that voter fraud flipped that presidential election anyway. So, and I'm sure that could never happen again. That could never happen again. Certainly not for a Democratic candidate. That's impossible. But am I still going to vote for this upcoming midterm? Yes. Do I expect my vote to matter? Only in one way. They can't completely make up all the numbers. They can't just throw out every vote and write in whatever they want. That's not really within their capability yet. Do I think that Republicans are going to flip a lot of districts and maybe even some governorships? Yes. Have I been hearing that there's going to be a colossal tidal wave. To quote a Six Hex and Ham reviewer I saw in the comics, he said comment section of his video on Chesa Bowden. He said he expected it to be like if a meteor hit the ocean. And when meteors, like huge, giant, cataclysmic meteors, hit the ocean, it shoots water into space beyond the ionosphere to rain it back down upon the land. And he expects a red wave of this proportion. I naturally do not, because that would imply that all of these entrenched, deep, dark, blue areas along the West Coast and parts of the East Coast and in major metropolitan areas that are just absolutely crime-ridden shitholes, that these are all going to go red, and it's enough is enough, says the populace. We're done with this. Even if I believed every single election in the United States was legitimate and had no fraud whatsoever, I don't believe that's the case. I believe that Democrats are fully incorrigible. They cannot be fixed. They're psychopaths. They're delusional. Liberalism is literally a mental disorder, which is why it's no surprise that the mentally ill, the actually diagnosed mentally ill, are heavily drawn to an organization that excuses all of their bad behavior and encourages it, that financially rewards people for being child predators and violent criminals and delusional psychopaths and sadists, that sadism is rewarded in these areas. Who would give up such a good deal? Why would a demon vote for the angels of heaven to come in and fix things in their little cesspit? It's not going to happen. However, as far as we can tell, nothing has been done about the controversial situation that happened in 2020. Nothing has been done about that. In fact, Biden has successfully entrenched mail-in voting, the easiest form of voting to defraud in any nation. There are third world despot fucking dictator lands where mail-in voting is considered invalid because of how vulnerable it is. You can't mail-in vote in like Mexico, let alone any place worse than that shithole. So the fact that we do that means that we're never going to be certain that shenanigans are not occurring, because it is such a massively vulnerable thing. And that's to say nothing of the vulnerabilities in the low-tech, easily exploitable bullshit going on with the electronic counting systems and the glitches and whatnot that were occurring. Glitches. There's not going to be a red wave. There's going to maybe be a red, very small localized flood, maybe. There's going to be maybe like a red swelling of the river that's already there. There's not going to be a tidal wave. And there's going to immediately be more people getting replaced in these blue districts with more blue people who are as bad or worse than the blue people who just got ousted for destroying the shit. And these people are never going to get better. Just look in Europe. How many Labour voters in the UK have Labour destroy their area and say, well, we should just get a different Labour guy? Or we should get whatever the equivalent to their Green Party is. We're going to go for the next leftist. And of course, when it comes to the UK, people think the Tories are a solution at all because the Tories are supposedly their far-right party. Tories are to the left of American Democrats, and American Democrats are fucking lunatics. So, no, UK, the only thing that can fix you is, well, a meteor. Just like the only thing that can fix California is, well, a meteor. Washington, a meteor. Oregon, a meteor. Maryland, a meteor. Delaware, meteor. New York's meteor. Literally something that removes the people who are there and the politicians that are there in the system that is there entirely is the only solution, which of course is impossible. Therefore, these places are not going to get better, period. They're terminal. They're done. And the people who can no longer tolerate living in a pretty much a tumor, a diseased tumor on the face of this country, will simply move to some place that is not disease and infect it. That's all that's going to happen. Nothing is going to get better, and certainly not in the next 20 years, let alone in the next 10 months. And again, I have to say this every video, if you're not stockpiling food, if you're not limiting how far you're driving and trying to conserve gasoline wherever you can, if you're not saving money and not making exorbitant purchases, you're vulnerable to the oncoming economic collapse of this country. This is going to be worse than 2008. It's already happening. It's been happening since Trump was still in office. Learn about the Federal Reserve and the effects of quantitative easing, and that even during the so-called soaring heights of the NASDAQ and Dow 500 and whatnot, the record-setting stock market under Trump's presidency, they were still releasing trillions, multiple trillions of dollars in what they call quantitative easing, which is to try to slow market volatility by introducing fake money from the Federal Reserve Bank, basically inventing dollars and putting them into the system, which naturally causes what? Inflation. There is now 3 times as much money, and there's more, actually more than 3 times as much total dollars in the American economy right now than there was when Trump took office. There is 3 times more money than has ever been in the American system, and none of it is real wealth. If you're wondering why inflation is running away, it is running away and nothing can stop it. The cat is already out of the bag. The collapse is already imminent. And I'm sorry if it sounds voting, but even under, sounds black-pilled, but voting, even under an optimal and fair and legitimate system, is not going to fix it. It is not going to fix it. It cannot be fixed. And of course, I don't believe our system is optimal or legitimate. So, of course, I am going to vote because I want people to see that, even if I'm in a county that has a very suspect election, that at least the right-wing vote has drastically increased. And of course, the left-wing vote naturally increased far beyond that. And of course, it stays blue, which I don't think I have a problem like that where I live. But there are going to be a lot of people where the only thing you can do to make yourself heard is just to drastically show record right-wing voting in your area, even though your right-wing candidate is not going to win. To just at least show that there's a shifting of consciousness in the country to provoke further change down the road. That is all you can do. But I guess just to bring it back to crime, which, gosh, I'm surprised I have to say anything, which is why most of this video was about elections rather than crime. Decriminalization solves nothing, and that includes decriminalization of most drugs. I believe in the decriminalization of marijuana. So a lot of people think that the drug war in general is wrong. And that's not true. The participation of the federal government on the drugs side of the drug war is what's caused it to be so bad. The fact that the CIA are notorious drug pushers, and that it is well known that the American government has sought to control poppy fields even more than they sought to control rare minerals and oil fields in the Middle East during our Middle Eastern occupations. This country has been participating not in a lot of wars for oil, but a lot of wars for opium. And that is, oil is far and away not what's been important to our pro-Israeli wars in the Middle East. So decriminalizing this shit that kills people on the regular, trying to ignore the new fentanyl part of the picture that is killing people in record numbers all over the place. Ignore the fact that, say, in parts of Oregon where there's been full drug decriminalization, overdoses, fatal overdoses of opium addicts, including also hospitalizations that they survive of overdoses. The latter, surviving overdoses, is up like 200 and something percent, and fatal overdoses is up 170%. You're going to see that everywhere that people try to follow that track. And if you think that that's going to reduce criminal behavior and criminal violent crime in relation to stuff like cocaine or heroin, if you think that's going to occur, you're drastically mistaken. Okay? And if you think you can shift people away from illegal drugs that are illicitly manufactured and are more likely to kill people, and get them to shift back on the opiate train when nobody's controlling prescription drug prices at all, no. You know, I went through the rehab system. I never did opiates or anything that was likely to directly kill me. I went through rehab over 10 years ago. And, you know, I went through a bad phase outside of college. I've been honest about that. And the amount of people I saw in rehab that started, usually due to a legitimate reason like an injury, on opiate prescription painkillers, developed a dependency, and then rapidly switched to street heroin because of the price difference to get the same result, paying a fraction as much. They went straight to heroin. And then, of course, heroin wasn't usually what got them into rehab. Heroin was ruining their lives so much that they usually needed what they a separate drug to get them to go on a tolerance come down, what they call it, off of heroin. So when they were cycling off of heroin, they started doing meth, and meth accelerated their downfall to the point that they ended up in rehab. And if you think, oh, let's not control meth, let's not control heroin, let's certainly not control, for some reason, illegal drugs like Roxicet, Percocet, Oxycodone, Oxycontin, all that shit, if we're not going to control these things, then that problem will not get better, and the violent crime tied to it and the black market associated with it will not improve, period. That level of legalization is a stupid libertarian pipe dream that will solve nothing. There are things that need to be kept out of the hands of the citizenry because they are too dangerous, and it's not guns, it's drugs. The drug war is legitimate insofar as it should occur. It's illegitimate because the government is fixing the game, because the government is participating heavily in the drug pushing as well as the drug policing part of the drug war. That's the problem. You know, keep things in the proper perspective. There is no shortage of right-wing people who are correct for the wrong reasons. And because of those wrong reasons, their ideas of how to solve the problem are wrong. Okay? There's no shortage of that. And believe me, there's probably going to be more Republicans are wrong about most shit type stuff coming up if I continue the series well into the future. Because oftentimes it's impossible to talk about how bad Democrats have fucked shit up without commenting on how the Republicans have not helped. So anyway, 23 minutes is much longer than the 15 minutes I usually try to do these videos in. We're going to probably cut it off here. Not sure what we're going to be talking about next. It's probably going to be a few weeks before I am certain about what to make the next video on this series on, or even whatever my next video is, because there's no shortage of shit to talk about. I'm just not here to tell you shit that you're already hearing. I'm not here to reinforce opinions that we all have pretty regularly, pretty uniformly. I'm looking to enlighten you about shit that you're maybe not quite as aware of, or that you're having a malformed conception of the problem and potential solution of something that we're all aware is a problem. Anyway, thanks for watching.